Hello, welcome to the enchanted kingdom of Hermione. We're up here in the turret of pleasure. It's where the Lord Chamberlain usually resides, and that's me, Zip Gun. And today I want to talk, I've been feeling lonely and unloved, so I figured I'd get more eyeballs by simply mentioning Frank Zappa. Because every time I do anything on Zappa, suddenly I get millions of views. And I just so happen to have bought the new Frank Zappa box set, which I have duly reviewed previously, so I won't belabor that. But I also received a couple of new Zappa books. And what's more, I figured I would just talk about Zappa books. There's a lot of them. And now, Frank Zappa, interesting guy. Depending on where you sit, he was either a very unique rock and roll musician, or he was a hopelessly misunderstood classical musician who only did the rock and roll to pay the symphony orchestras to play his classical stuff, and the truth is probably somewhere in between there. But in a career that was cut tragically short, because the man was only in his 50s when he died, and he was a workaholic. The man did a lot of music, and my personal opinion of Mr. Zappa's music is a lot of it's really good, a lot of it is excellent, A+. A lot of it is kind of for the cheap seats, and a lot of it is just kind of not really much of anything. He primarily, as an instrumentalist, was a guitarist. And his guitar playing, I like it and I admire it, but he's not my favorite guitar player. Everything he plays is essentially blues, which is sort of like saying everything Ornette Coleman plays is blues too, but that's his reference. He never really shakes it. I don't think he wants to shake it. It's his roots. Anyway, I figured I'd go through some of these books. Now, some of these I've had for a while, and I'll tell you what the two new ones are. But these are the 5 I have right now here. My dear friend Eric Prue, the Emperor of Austria, he buys these a lot too, and we kind of trade. I bought the Moon Unit book, and when I was done with it, I gave it to him. He buys books and lends them to me, and so on and so forth. Saves on the cost of buying the damn things, because they can get expensive. But if you look up on the internet, books about Frank Zappa, there is a lot of them. The one I've not read, and the one I want to read now, is Barry Miles' biography. Because Barry is, with Barry you kind of know what you're getting. I've read a few of his books. I understand kind of his style, his way. This one here, now this one's great because, first of all, you can't read that. That's impossible. This was the first book I ever found about Zappa, and I have had this a really long time. Richard Gray, Mother, is the story of Frank Zappa. And as an overview of the man's work, it's not bad. Proteus, British, I do believe. I think this came out in 1985. And it's, he wasn't dead yet. So it's, for when I had this book, it did the job quite nicely. And I never really felt the need to get a better one for whatever reason. Maybe it's just one didn't poke itself in front of my nose. Here's one that it's funny because I just cracked this again. This book is difficult for me. What is it again? Negative Dialectic of Poodle Play by Ben Watson. This is almost 600 pages. There's a lot of stuff here. A lot of this is gobbledygook. James Joyce is mentioned. But I think the best review of this book... Now, having said this, I'm going to go back and read it again, because there's a couple of things I was thumbing through this just in prep, because I haven't read this in a long time. And there's a lot of footnotes. This guy is a footnote guy. Um, a couple of the quotes. Yeah, someone should write a novel about the writing of this book. It would be a comic masterpiece. London Sunday Times. I'm not sure what they mean by that, but here's a good one. New York Times Book Review. An impassioned attempt to demonstrate that Zappa was not just a musical innovator, but a wordsmith on par with James Joyce and a philosopher on par with Theodore Adorno. He doesn't quite achieve his goal, but he has fun trying. That's a good review. Not a bad description. The one at the bottom really made me laugh. A great book about one of the most important figures of this century. Ben Watson's fascinating book takes you to the heart of Mr. Zappa's mad and sane mind. You go, okay. That's a quote by Pamela Does Bars. Okay. This is really for nerds. I don't know. This guy thinks Frank is a far more important cultural figure than perhaps maybe I do. He takes it to the nth degree. I struggled with parts of this book. He goes sort of album by album, and I'm going to go through that again because he makes some good points in that. But there's very little talk about stuff I want to know more about, like his record labels and how they came to be and what happened with them and so on and so forth. Almost nothing about that in 600 pages. So, okay. I was sort of on the verge of saying it's no good at all. But it looks like there is merit. Okay. Got a big pile of books slopping around. This one I got for Christmas. I had actually read it before, sadly. This is I think there might be a few of these. In fact, what is there? The one I read, the one by his secretary, what's her name, Pauline. Sort of, me and Frank kind of books. Frank and Co. Co de Klet is a Dutch fellow who met Frank in the later part of his career. Did a lot of stuff to help him out in Holland with things like broadcasts and recordings, and sort of became an associate. And Frank was, Frank had a lot of people like this in the world that were friends. These guys, Claude looks upon this as a friendship. It was probably a little bit of a transactional relationship, but Claude doesn't seem to mind. And I know what those are like because I've been involved in some of those myself, and they can be very rewarding. And usually they're rewarding for both people. But this is a lot of interviews. And much as I love that, it gets into some detail, but you can tell that Frank is very comfortable with this guy. And this guy also, knows sort of where not to go, because he knows he'll get Frank's dander up, perhaps. So there's a lot of kind of softball questions. There's a really kind of inconsequential Beefheart interview in it. It's mostly interviews with a few discussions, and there's some communications between Barking Pumpkin Central and Co. about this and that and the next thing. Total fan book. I read it. There's a few kernels of wisdom in it that I was unaware of, but I could have lived without it, perhaps. But there you go. One that the Emperor of Austria lent me, and this is actually an interesting book. It's not very big. Zappa and Jazz. Now, Jeff Wills knows his jazz. That much I can assure you, because he goes through almost every jazz-like piece Zappa ever did, and he can sort of tell you what it sounds like, who it sounds like before. This guy really does know. He knows his Zappa, and he knows his jazz. This I found a really fun book to read, because one of the things he kind of does is he takes Zappa quotes, most of which are things like, I have no interest in jazz, blah, blah, blah. And then he kind of turns them on their head and says, well, if Zappa doesn't have much interest in jazz, why does this, And so he does a lot of that in this book. I think we all kind of know those of us that follow Zappa with any sort of dispassionate eye, that he was a lot of the time he was kind of full of shit. So, you know, the sort of, whatever you want to call it, putting his quotes in context is fine. It doesn't matter one way or the other because the analysis is good. One thing I should mention about the Coe book is there's a great little side thing where Coe interviews him in, I think it's New York City, in some kind of weird hotel room that has a spiral staircase that goes to a second floor where there's a bedroom. And while Chloe is interviewing Frank, he gets sort of aware that there's maybe somebody upstairs. And later, when he leaves with his friend, they realize his friend has left her umbrella there. So they go back to get it, and Frank's like at the door, "Who is it? What do you want?" And it's like, "Oh, sorry, we left our umbrella there." And Frank is kind of in boxer shorts at the door. And it's like, "Oh yeah, okay." And of course, Coe has to mention this in the book because, you know. And then he mentions when he's at Zappa's place in L.A., mention is made of this hotel room, and Zappa goes behind Gale and sort of catches Coe's eye and kind of, no. You know, what goes on the road stays on the road, which of course the Zappas practiced a very, what you might call, open relationship, I guess. And, you know, which is neither here nor there. But that's Coe kind of asserting his, you know, how well he knew Frank, I think. I would recommend this, Jeff Will. If you're a jazz guy that thinks Zappa is interesting jazz music, I would recommend this book. The only knock against it, and this is going to happen a lot, is that it doesn't, this is a few years old. I thought this was new, but it's not. It is from, when is it from again? It doesn't have, he didn't have access to all the extra stuff in the 2015, so it's old. He didn't have access to like the Waka Jawaka box set, which is full of fantastic stuff that he would have just gone nuts over. But a good book nonetheless. And finally, I'm going to bring this out because I've still got it. It is, you know, his autobiography. And of course, as George Orwell once said, autobiography is never to be trusted unless it reveals something shameful. This doesn't reveal much that's shameful per se, but there's enough there's enough in it to let you know where the real Frank Zappa kind of lived. It's an entertaining book. There's some great anecdotes in it. Zappa, the problem with all of this Zappa, and of course, like now the one size fits all box just came out. It's excellent, of course, the last word on that era. There's already been announced the Bongo Fury 50th anniversary box set, which is 5 CDs, and it's basically more of the same. If you're hoping as a Beefheart fan that there's all kinds of unreleased Beefheart, you are going to be in for a bit of a disappointment, because I don't think there's any. But it's the perfect document of that moment in time, and that'll be out in March. So the scrutiny is kind of increasing because of all these 50th anniversary things, and I'm all down with this. I like these 50th anniversary things. Hopefully they kind of speed them up, because one would think the market is dying off, but I'll keep buying them up until they get out of the shake your booty era, maybe. I don't know. The other books I read, where was this now? I got a list somewhere hidden. The books, right, I forgot about this. Here we go. Barry Miles, I've not read that one. Freak Out, My Life with Frank Zappa by Pauline Butcher. That's a good one. It's a memoir of, a period of time. She was with him up until, I forget when, 71 maybe. And, you know, she actually kind of lived with them. So you get a little bit of insight there. Earth to Moon by Moon Unit Zappa is a very touching book. It's a little disturbing. Moon came out of her family situation slightly bent, if not, you know, she's okay and everything, but It was a funny family to grow up in. All the litigation with the estate and stuff has left its mark. And it's a bit of it's not a very happy book to read, I don't think. But it's interesting if you're into their family. Being Frank, My Time with Frank Zappa by Nigel Lennon. This is a dreadful piece of shit book of the first water, a personal account of working with Zappa. This person alleges that they played with Zappa, although there are no dates. There's very little places for, as what's his name says, Zappologist. You can't figure out when they're talking about, when exactly do these events occur. A lot of it is very tawdry, seducing Frank and blah, blah, blah. It's fucking terrible. It's worth reading if you can borrow a copy. Don't fucking buy it. It's probably mostly not exactly true, I'm going to say. Nigel Lennon has many, many, many videos on YouTube that are endless that all talk about Zappa. Something of an obsession, I think. Did apparently have a fling with Zappa or some such thing. But I tell you what, again, the Emperor of Love gave me that one. And I read it at one sitting. It was so bad. But, this is what happens when you're Frank Zappa. It's like books about whomever, books about Springsteen. He has a cult. And that cult, like I say, in a couple of weeks I'll look when this video comes out and I'll see that 10 times as many people watched it as my normal stuff because it's about Zappa. And I like Zappa. I like a lot of his stuff. I've really, really been enjoying the reissue, the 50th anniversary era that we're passing through, the Waka Jawaka discrete era stuff. I really like that stuff in the first place. And in many respects, I haven't replaced my copies, my original vinyl copies. Like Roxy and Elsewhere, I still have. I finally got a CD copy of it. So I'm rediscovering this stuff and it's great. This is what archival stuff is all about. So there you have it. Books about Zappa. I'll do some other books later. But I figured I'd get all the Zappa ones out of the way. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the notification bell, and we'll talk at you later with more music stuff. Thanks for watching.